The French Revolution had a major impact on Europe and the New World. In the short term, France lost thousands of her countrymen in the form of émigrés, or emigrants who wished to escape political tensions and save their lives. A number of individuals settled in the neighboring countries, however quite a few also went to the United States. The displacement of these Frenchmen led to a spread of French culture, policies regulating immigration, and a safe haven for royalists and other counter-revolutionaries to outlast the violence of the French Revolution. The long-term impact on France was profound, shaping politics, society, religion and ideas, and polarizing politics for more than a century. The closer other countries were, the greater and deeper was the French impact, bringing liberalism and the end of many feudal or traditional laws and practices. However, there was also a conservative counter-reaction that defeated Napoleon, reinstalled the Bourbon kings, and in some ways reversed the new reforms. Most of the new nations created by the French were abolished and returned to pre-war owners in 1814. However, Frederick Hartz emphasizes the benefits the Italians gained from the French Revolution. For nearly 2 decades the Italians had the excellent codes of law, a fair system of taxation, a better economic situation, and more religious and intellectual toleration than they had known for centuries. Everywhere old physical, economic, and intellectual barriers had been thrown down and the Italians had begun to be aware of a common nationality. Likewise in Switzerland, the long-term impact of the French Revolution has been assessed by Martin. It proclaimed the equality of citizens before the law, equality of languages, freedom of thought and faith. It created a Swiss citizenship, basis of our modern nationality, and the separation of powers, of which the old regime had no conception. It suppressed internal tariffs and other economic restraints. It unified weights and measures, reformed civil and penal law, authorized mixed marriages, suppressed torture and improved justice. It developed education and public works. The greatest impact came of course in France itself. In addition to effects similar to those in Italy and Switzerland, France saw the introduction of the principle of legal equality, and the downgrading of the once powerful and rich Catholic Church to just a bureau controlled by the government. Power became centralized in Paris, with its strong bureaucracy and an army supplied by conscripting all young men. French politics were permanently polarized. New names were given, left and right, for the supporters and opponents of the principles of the revolution. Impact on France. The changes in France were enormous. Some were widely accepted and others were bitterly contested into the late 20th century. Before the revolution, the people had little power or voice. The kings had so thoroughly centralized the system that most nobles spent their time at Versailles, and played only a small direct role in their home districts. Thomson says that the kings had ruled by virtue of their personal wealth, the patronage of the nobility, the disposal of ecclesiastical offices, the provincial governors, their control over the judges and magistrates, and their command of the army. After the first year of revolution, this power had been stripped away. The king was a figurehead. The nobility had lost all their titles and most of their land. The church lost its monasteries and farmlands. Bishops, judges and magistrates were elected by the people. The army was almost helpless, with military power in the hands of the new Revolutionary National Guard. The central elements of 1789 were the slogan, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, which Lefebvre calls the incarnation of the revolution as a whole. The long-term impact on France was profound, shaping politics, society, religion and ideas, and polarizing politics for more than a century. Historian François Aurard writes, from the social point of view, the revolution consisted in the suppression of what was called the feudal system, in the emancipation of the individual, in greater division of landed property, the abolition of the privileges of noble birth, the establishment of equality, the simplification of life, The French Revolution differed from other revolutions in being not merely national, for it aimed at benefiting all humanity. Impact on Europe. Europe was racked by 2 decades of war revolving around France's efforts to spread its revolutionary ideals, and the opposition of reactionary royalty, led by Britain and Austria. War broke out in 1792 as Austria and Prussia invaded France, but were defeated at the Battle of Valmy. French emigration to escape political tensions and save their lives. A number of individuals who were mostly men emigrated from France and settled in the neighboring countries. However, quite a few also went to the United States. The presence of these thousands of Frenchmen of varying socio-economic backgrounds who had just fled a hotbed of revolutionary activity posed a problem for the host nations, which extended refuge to the migrants. The fear was that they brought with them a plot to disrupt the political order, which did lead to increased regulation and documentation of the influx of immigrants in neighboring countries. Still, most nations such as Britain remained magnanimous and welcomed the French conquests in foreign affairs. The French army at first was quite successful. It conquered Belgium and turned it into another province of France. It conquered the Netherlands, and made it a puppet state. It took control of the German areas on the left bank of the Rhine River and set up a puppet regime. It conquered Switzerland and most of Italy, setting up a series of puppet states. The result was glory for France, and an infusion of much-needed money from the conquered lands, which also provided direct support to the French army. However, the enemies of France, led by Britain and funded by the inexhaustible British treasury, formed a second coalition in 1799. It scored a series of victories that rolled back French successes, and the French army trapped in Egypt. Napoleon himself slipped through the British blockade in October 1799, returning to Paris. Napoleon conquered most of Italy in the name of the French Revolution in 1797–99. He consolidated old units and split up Austria's holdings. He set up a series of new republics, complete with new codes of law and abolition of old feudal privileges. Napoleon's Cisalpine Republic was centered on Milan. Genoa, the city, became a republic while its hinterland became the Ligurian Republic. The Roman Republic was formed out of the papal holdings while the Pope himself was sent to France. The Neapolitan Republic was formed around Naples, but it lasted only 5 months before the enemy forces of the coalition recaptured it. In 1805, he formed the Kingdom of Italy, with himself as king and his stepson as viceroy. In addition, France turned the Netherlands into the Batavian Republic, and Switzerland into the Helvetic Republic. The political and administrative systems were modernized, the metric system introduced, and trade barriers reduced. Jewish ghettos were abolished. Belgium and Piedmont became integral parts of France. The new nations were abolished and returned to pre-war owners in 1814. However, Arts emphasizes the benefits the Italians gained from the French Revolution. For nearly 2 decades the Italians had the excellent codes of law, a fair system of taxation, a better economic situation, and more religious and intellectual toleration than they had known for centuries. Everywhere old physical, economic, and intellectual barriers had been thrown down, and the Italians had begun to be aware of a common nationality. Nationalism. Otto Dan and John Dinwiddie report. It has long been almost a truism of European history that the French Revolution gave a great stimulus to the growth of modern nationalism. Nationalism was emphasized by historian Carlton J.H. Hayes as a major result of the French Revolution across Europe. The impact on French nationalism was profound. Napoleon became such a heroic symbol of the nation that the glory was easily picked up by his nephew, who was overwhelmingly elected president. The influence was great in the hundreds of small German states and elsewhere, where it was either inspired by the French example or in reaction against it. Britain saw minority support, but the majority, and especially the elite, strongly opposed the French Revolution. Britain led and funded the series of coalitions that fought France from 1793 to 1815, and then restored the Bourbons. Edmund Burke was the chief spokesman for the opposition. In Ireland, the effect was to transform what had been an attempt by Protestant settlers to gain some autonomy into a mass movement led by the Society of United Irishmen involving Catholics and Protestants. It stimulated the demand for further reform throughout Ireland, especially in Ulster. The upshot was a revolt in 1798, led by Wolfe Tone, that was crushed by Britain. German reaction to the revolution swung from favourable at first to antagonistic. At first it brought liberal and democratic ideas, the end of guilds, of serfdom and of the Jewish ghetto. It brought economic freedoms and agrarian and legal reform. German intellectuals celebrated the outbreak, hoping to see the triumph of reason and the Enlightenment. There were enemies as well, as the royal courts in Vienna and Berlin denounced the overthrow of the king and the threatened spread of notions of liberty, equality, and fraternity. By 1793, the execution of the French king and the onset of the Terror disillusioned the Bildungsbürgertum. Reformers said the solution was to have faith in the ability of Germans to reform their laws and institutions in peaceful fashion. After Prussia was humiliated by Napoleon, opinion swung against France and stimulated and shaped German nationalism. France took direct control of the Rhineland 1794 to 1814 and radically and permanently liberalized the government, society and economy. The French swept away centuries' worth of outmoded restrictions and introduced unprecedented levels of efficiency. The chaos and barriers in a land divided and subdivided among many different petty principalities gave way to a rational, simplified, centralized system controlled by Paris and run by Napoleon's relatives. The most important impact came from the abolition of all feudal privileges and historic taxes, the introduction of legal reforms of the Napoleonic Code, and the reorganization of the judicial and local administrative systems. The economic integration of the Rhineland with France increased prosperity, especially in industrial production, while business accelerated with the new efficiency and lowered trade barriers. The Jews were liberated from the ghetto. One sour point was the hostility of the French officials toward the Roman Catholic Church, the choice of most of the residents. Much of South Germany felt a similar but more muted influence of the French Revolution, while in Prussia and areas to the east there was far less impact. The reforms were permanent. Decades later, workers and peasants in the Rhineland often appealed to Jacobinism to oppose unpopular government programs, while the intelligentsia demanded the maintenance of the Napoleonic Code. Switzerland. The French invaded Switzerland and turned it into an ally known as the Helvetic Republic. The interference with localism and traditional liberties was deeply resented, although some modernizing reforms took place. Resistance was strongest in the more traditional Catholic bastions, with armed uprisings breaking out in spring 1798 in the central part of Switzerland. Alois von Reding, a powerful Swiss general, led an army of 10,000 men from the cantons of Uri, Schwyz and Nidwalden against the French. This resulted in the Swiss regaining control of Lucerne. However, due to the sheer greatness in size of the French army, von Reding's movement was eventually suppressed. The French army suppressed the uprisings, but support for revolutionary ideals steadily declined, as the Swiss resented their loss of local democracy. The new taxes, the centralization, and the hostility to religion. The instability of France resulted in the creation of two different revolutionary groups with different ideologies of revolt. The aristocrats, seeking the restoration of the old Swiss Confederacy, and a section of the population wanting a coup. Furthermore, Switzerland became a battleground between the armies of France, Austria and Russia. Ultimately, this instability Frequent coups within the government and the eventual Border-Papi forced Napoleon to sign the Act of Medallion, which led to the fall of the Helvetic Republic and the restoration of the Confederacy. The long-term impact of the French Revolution has been assessed by Martin. It proclaimed the equality of citizens before the law, equality of languages, freedom of thought and faith. It created a Swiss citizenship, basis of our modern nationality, and the separation of powers, of which the old regime had no conception. It suppressed internal tariffs and other economic restraints. It unified weights and measures, reformed civil and penal law, authorized mixed marriages, suppressed torture and improved justice. It developed education and public works. Belgium. French invaded the territory of modern-day Belgium and controlled it between 1794 to 1814. The French imposed reforms and incorporated the territory into France. New rulers were sent in by Paris. Belgian men were drafted into the French wars and heavily taxed. Nearly everyone was Catholic, but the church was repressed. Resistance was strong in every sector, as Belgian nationalism emerged to oppose French rule. The French legal system, however, was adopted, with its equal legal rights, and abolition of class distinctions. Belgium now had a government bureaucracy selected by merit. Antwerp regained access to the sea and grew quickly as a major port and business center. France promoted commerce and capitalism, paving the way for the ascent of the bourgeoisie and the rapid growth of manufacturing and mining. In economics, therefore, the nobility declined while the middle-class Belgian entrepreneurs flourished because of their inclusion in a large market, paving the way for Belgium's leadership role after 1815 in the Industrial Revolution on the continent. Netherlands. France turned the Netherlands into a puppet state that had to pay large indemnities. Denmark and Sweden. The Kingdom of Denmark adopted liberalizing reforms in line with those of the French Revolution, with no direct contact. Danes were aware of French ideas and agreed with them, as it moved from Danish absolutism to a liberal constitutional system between 1750 to 1850. The change of government in 1784 was caused by a power vacuum created when King Christian VII took ill, and power shifted to the Crown Prince and reform-oriented landowners. In contrast to old regime France, agricultural reform was intensified in Denmark. Serfdom was abolished and civil rights were extended to the peasants. The finances of the Danish state were healthy, and there were no external or internal crises. That is, reform was gradual and the regime itself carried out agrarian reforms that had the effect of weakening absolutism by creating a class of independent, peasant freeholders. Much of the initiative came from well-organized liberals who directed political change in the first half of the 19th century. In Sweden, King Gustav III was an enlightened despot, who weakened the nobility and promoted numerous major social reforms. He felt the Swedish monarchy could survive and flourish by achieving a coalition with the newly emerged middle classes against the nobility. He was close to King Louis XVI, so he was disgusted with French radicalism. Nevertheless, he decided to promote additional anti-feudal reforms to strengthen his hand among the middle classes. When the king was assassinated in 1792, his brother Charles became regent, but real power was with Gustav Adolf Reuterholm, who bitterly opposed the French Revolution and all its supporters. Under King Gustav IV Adolf, Sweden joined various coalitions against Napoleon, but was badly defeated and lost much of its territory, especially Finland and Pomerania. The king was overthrown by the army, which in 1810 decided to bring in one of Napoleon's marshals, Bernadotte, as the heir apparent and army commander. He had a Jacobin background and was well grounded in revolutionary principles, but put Sweden in the coalition that opposed Napoleon. Bernadotte served as a quite conservative King Charles XIV John of Sweden.